The other day, I was scrolling through the comments on a niche South Korean political forum, and I noticed something bizarre. Users were passionately debating a theory from a YouTuber named Korea Captain, a former Navy officer who claimed, with absolute certainty, that China had exactly 99 spies embedded in the highest levels of their government. No more, no less. What's even crazier isn't the theory itself, but, who was actually listening. It turns out South Korea's former president, Yoon Suk-yeol, was a fan. Before his approval rating cratered to a dismal 11% and led to his impeachment, he told a reporter that traditional media was useless and that the real story was being told by these video creators. Think about that. The leader of a global tech powerhouse was building his entire geopolitical worldview based on algorithmic clickbait and, well, spy thriller fantasies. While the West was busy watching YouTube videos about China's inevitable collapse or how Russia will eventually backstab Beijing, the South Korean leadership was trapped in a digital hall of mirrors. They were so busy chasing ghosts that they didn't see the real shift happening right under their feet. But then the backlash hit. The radical, hardline stance fueled by these information bubbles eventually snapped. And suddenly, the stage was set for someone like Lee Jae-myung, a man who talks about pragmatic diplomacy and national interest over ideology. And it leads to a conclusion that runs completely against the mainstream. While the algorithm is feeding the West a soothing balm of China isolation theory, China is actually finding its biggest opening in years. While everyone is distracted by the 99 spies and the digital fog, Beijing is in a quiet room in Seoul, dismantling the American alliance system brick by brick. What if the encirclement of China isn't closing, but actually starting to flip? And that really is the central premise of this deep dive. The mainstream narrative of China isolation is, we believe, an algorithmic illusion. It's designed to provide that psychological massage we crave here in the West. Our mission today is to cut through that fog and examine the concrete evidence that Beijing is quietly and systematically dismantling the structural pillars of the American alliance system in Seoul. We're looking at two massive competing realities here. First, the comprehensive and unprecedented structural hardening of the US-Japan-ROK military bloc, the construction of a geopolitical wall, if you will. And second, China's massive coordinated strategy to pull South Korea toward economic and diplomatic realism using offers it simply cannot refuse.
And what's fascinating here is just how deliberate and systemic both sides are being. The US-Japan-ROK cooperation has moved far past, vague political statements and is now characterized by systematic institutional integration. Analysts are calling it a quasi-alliance dynamic with hard operational and technological alignment. That integration is the geopolitical wall. But against that wall, China is deploying a strategic counteroffer, in economics, technology, regional security, a multi-pronged strategy designed to provide South Korea with a genuine, practical breakout opportunity, freeing it from the limitations of military dependency. We absolutely have to understand the mechanics of this military integration first, though, to really appreciate the depth and gravity of the strategic counterpunch being delivered by Beijing.
Okay, so let's unpack this wall. We're starting with the foundation, the structural shift. This isn't just about a couple of ships deciding to run a joint drill when it's convenient. We are talking about a fundamental, intentional shift from loose collaboration towards structural binding, actively forging this quasi-alliance. This integration is now moving towards system-level coordination, which, that signals a serious long-term commitment.
It does. And if we trace the historical arc, the initial foundations were pretty simple bilateral alliances.
Yeah.
US-Japan and US-ROK formed after the Cold War. For decades, Japan and the ROK barely spoke on military matters, driven by complex historical animosities. The catalyst that forced them to the table in the 1990s was the emerging DPRK nuclear issue. And that led to the first real institutional mechanism, the establishment of the Trilateral Coordination and Oversight Group, or TCOG, back in 1999.
TCOG. That sounds like it was born purely out of necessity, right? A way to ensure Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo weren't tripping over each other while addressing Pyongyang?
That's precisely right. TCOG was initially a political consultation body. It was a venue for regular security contact to coordinate policies toward North Korea. It was the first step in building the basic trust infrastructure needed for any future military cooperation. But then the institutionalization accelerated dramatically, signaling a real shift in purpose.
Okay, so let's jump forward to the moment where this relationship went from just cooperation to something that actually looks and feels like an alliance.
That moment was the Camp David milestone in August 2023. That summit didn't just create a photo opportunity, it institutionalized high-level cooperation and crucially established the principle that a threat to one is a threat to all. Now, they carefully avoided calling it a formal treaty alliance because Japan and ROK still lack a reciprocal defense treaty. But that language is the core of alliance behavior. It obligates rapid consultation and response planning, and that just accelerated the entire dynamic. And this acceleration continued rapidly through 2024 and 2025 with hard bureaucratic steps.
When you say hard bureaucratic steps, what does that actually look like? Can you walk us through those formal documents and structures that make this integration so rigid and, I guess, less susceptible to political shifts?
Certainly. The key structural document was signed in July 2024, the Memorandum of Cooperation on the Trilateral Security Cooperation Framework, or TSCF. This MOC formalized several critical areas: routine, high-level policy consultations, systematic information sharing beyond just North Korean threats, and importantly, regular institutionalized trilateral drills. It moved cooperation from ad hoc decisions to routine, institutionally supported defense exchanges. But to implement that, you need a lasting body.
Then that's where the administrative infrastructure comes in, right?
Okay.
The Secretariat.
It's exactly. By November 2024, the three parties established the Trilateral Secretariat. This is the often overlooked administrative infrastructure that's essential for continuity. It's the body responsible for coordinating and implementing all shared defense commitments. It makes sure that the commitments made on paper are actually executed on the ground. You can think of it as the project management office for the quasi-alliance, ensuring continuity and follow-through regardless of political shifts in any one country, like the shift we just saw in Seoul.
And this is where the original justification starts to feel a little thin. The stated focus deterring the DPRK seems to have shifted pretty significantly. I mean, if we look at the source material, the cooperation goals have demonstrably expanded way beyond just the Korean Peninsula.
That is the most critical analytical shift. While the DPRK remains a convenient unifying justification, the primary strategic targets have been clearly reprioritized. The analysis we have shows the priority order is now: 1, containing China; 2, countering Russia's activities in the Far East; and then 3, deterring the DPRK. This fundamentally changes the nature of the framework. It makes the arrangement inherently geopolitical, aiming at order shaping across Asia, not just threat response on the peninsula.
It sounds like Washington is proactively encouraging, maybe even forcing its allies to step up their game and connect horizontally, which brings up the concept of a lattice-like architecture replacing the old hub-and-spoke model. Can you make that distinction clear for us?
Sure. The hub-and-spoke system was the legacy Cold War template. The U.S. was the central hub, managing separate, strictly bilateral relationships with its allies, the spokes. So Washington would talk to Tokyo, and Washington would talk to Seoul. But Tokyo and Seoul rarely coordinated directly on security matters. The lattice-like model is the U.S. initiative to maintain its dominance as the hub, while forcing these spokes, Japan and the ROK, to boost horizontal security connections between themselves. The goal is to build a comprehensive latticework of mutually reinforcing coalitions. It dramatically increases coordination and comprehensive operational effectiveness, especially in a conflict scenario where communications with the U.S. hub might be disrupted.
So it's about making the whole network more resilient and decentralized and forcing the allies to shoulder more joint security responsibility. And geographically, this integration isn't content to stay put in Northeast Asia. It sounds like this security framework is attempting a massive expansion into the Pacific.
It is. It's actively shaping what is termed a double arc of containment. The first arc is the immediate operational cooperation focused on Northeast Asia containing China, checking Russia's Far East activity, and deterring the DPRK. But they explicitly leverage this newly institutionalized cooperation to extend influence towards Southeast Asia and the Pacific Island countries. This second arc is often diplomatic and focuses on soft power, specifically expanding the influence of rules. This means things like training maritime security forces in these regions, running joint patrols and sharing intelligence protocols, explicitly aiming to limit China's growing regional economic and military presence.
So if the stated intention is to maintain peace and stability through deterrence, then what is the inherent structural trigger for tension that analysts are identifying here?
This is the core paradox. It's often referred to as the security conundrum, or the security dilemma in international relations theory. The military integration mechanism, while self-proclaimed by the participants as peace-maintaining and necessary for joint deterrence, is objectively viewed by the outside as translating that deterrence into exclusive security arrangements.
And exclusive security arrangements, that's where the danger lies, right? Because they exclude the major power on the continent.
Exactly. From the perspective of Beijing or Moscow, the problem is simple. One country's defensive measures, like this military integration, institutionalization of joint drills, and massive information sharing, are inevitably viewed as direct threats by the other side. This triggers a rising spiral of countermeasures and confrontation, often called the spiral model. This continuous structural reinforcement of exclusive mechanisms objectively exacerbates opposing tensions in Northeast Asia, leading to what our sources explicitly term a war incubation mechanism.
War incubation mechanism. That is stark terminology. What does that imply about the stability of the region?
Well, it implies that peace is replaced by a state of persistent tension. It doesn't mean war is tomorrow, but it means the institutional bundling, the Camp David agreements, the TSCF, the new command structures, and the constant cognitive mobilization through military drills. They gradually erode strategic stability. By making the alliance structure so rigid, you remove diplomatic flexibility. You lock countries into a zero-sum competition where every gain in security by one side is seen as a loss by the other, perpetually fueling the counter-escalation cycle. That institutional hardening is what China now seeks to breach by offering Seoul a true economic alternative. Okay, we've established the structural intent and the underlying paradox. Now let's dive into the operational mechanics. This is where we see the rubber meet the road, the deep alignment in command and control, or C2 systems, which signals a massive move toward genuinely integrated operations. This feels less like an alliance and more like a merger of military operating systems. That analogy holds up perfectly. We are seeing major organizational shifts specifically designed to enable seamless joint operations. Take the U.S. Forces Japan, or USFJ. The U.S. has a plan for a significant functional upgrade, elevating the rank of the commander of the USFJ to a 4-star rank with true operational control.
Wait, I always thought the USFJ commander was the main U.S. military leader in Japan. What does this elevation and the addition of operational control actually change on a practical level?
It changes everything in a crisis. Historically, the USFJ commander, typically a 3-star lieutenant general, had administrative control. Think of that as managing HR, logistics, budgets, and base maintenance. But operational control, the authority to direct combat actions or coordinate major deployments, that rested far away with the commander of Usindopakam in Hawaii. The proposed upgrade shifts the USFJ mission from merely managing alliance relationships to the actual coordination of joint operations with Japanese forces. It creates a localized, seamless mechanism for alliance operational command, which is critical for rapid decision-making in a high-speed contingency. You no longer have to wait for Hawaii to sign off on every move.
That dramatically speeds up the timeline for a coordinated response. And Japan's response to this is completely mirrored, isn't it? They created their own new command structure designed explicitly to fit this empowered USFJ.
Precisely. In lockstep, on March 24, 2025, Japan created the Japan Self-Defense Force Joint Operations Command, or JJOC. This new unified command system, staffed by around 240 personnel, is explicitly designed to improve the joint operations of the ground, maritime, and air self-defense forces. By centralizing command and improving inter-service communication, the JJOC is able to provide a much more efficient and unified response, specifically aligning campaign-level coordination and quick decision-making with the now empowered U.S. military command in Japan. The two commands are structurally engineered to work as a single machine.
And the ultimate strategic idea that ties these command systems together and justifies that increased operational speed is the one theater concept. This is where that geographic expansion we talked about becomes institutionalized in military doctrine.
The one theater concept, actively promoted by Japan and the U.S., is a major strategic declaration. It views the Korean Peninsula, the Japanese archipelago, China's Taiwan Island, and the Philippines as functionally a single, unified theater of operations. The core purpose is to break down geographic and traditional service-specific barriers. Institutionally, this provides the required support for rapid U.S. military force dispatching and, crucially, intelligence sharing across a massive area, scanning the East China Sea and the South China Sea. Strategically, this creates what they term cross-sea deterrence, linking the defense of key U.S. allies in a contiguous military zone.
That effectively turns any regional security issue, say a flare-up near the Taiwan Strait, into a direct shared concern for Seoul and Tokyo. And it justifies intervention or at least logistical support.
It does. It shifts the alliances from being focused purely on national defense to becoming integrated components of a broad Asia-wide containment strategy against any Chinese movements in the Pacific. Now, let's look at how this integration translates into kinetic preparation, the operational intensification we see in their drills and intelligence sharing.
The joint exercises have certainly ramped up. They've moved way past simple naval maneuvers.
Significantly so. They have evolved from traditional, specific tactical drills to comprehensive multi-domain operations. The landmark example is the annual Freedom Edge joint military exercises, which were first held in June 2024. These are now institutionalized regular events that really reflect this system-level integration.
What domains do these exercises cover? Because looking at the scope of the training tells us exactly what kind of future conflicts they are preparing for.
They are massive in scope, covering everything from the seafloor to orbit. The exercises include complex maritime ballistic missile defense, or BMD, advanced anti-submarine warfare, or ASW, air defense integration, maritime interception operations, cyber defense protocols, and even space collaboration. For instance, the November 2024 iteration included integrated training programs on space situational awareness and linking their respective data chains. This demonstrates a transition toward high-end, system-level integrated warfare readiness, where the three militaries can operate seamlessly and interdependently across all domains, sharing real-time information.
And speaking of real-time information, the most immediate practical component of this integration for the listener has to be the speed of intelligence sharing on the peninsula.
That's the most critical technological watershed moment. The activation of the real-time DPRK missile early warning data sharing mechanism in December 2023 was hugely significant. Historically, ROK and Japan had to route missile detection data through a U.S. command center, which then relayed it to the other ally. Now, by connecting the radar command and control systems of the three nations directly coordinated primarily through use in INDOPACOM, they achieved near instantaneous information exchange.
That's a major upgrade in operational speed. It shaves minutes off the response time.
Precisely. And the subsequent TSCF MOC in July 2024 further cemented this, expanding the shared data to cover a wider range of threats, including satellite reconnaissance and coordinated cyber threats. The U.S. Secretary of Defense at the time claimed this framework would upgrade the trio's intelligence capabilities to an unprecedented level. It makes Seoul's intelligence infrastructure inherently dependent on and fused with the U.S. system.
And finally, let's touch on the technological alignment in hardware and future warfare capabilities.
The integration extends to hardware and next-generation systems in a massive way. A primary military objective is ABM system integration. The plan to merge ROK's formidable THAAD system, Japan's advanced AG system, and U.S. Patriot systems into a unified, regional anti-ballistic missile network led and orchestrated by the U.S. This is about building a cohesive, multi-layered regional defense shield that operates under a single integrated command structure.
And beyond missile defense, there is a push to align on emerging technologies, which moves into industrial policy through the Disruptive Technology Protection Network, or DTPM.
The DTPM is crucial because it's not just about defense, it's about control. The network focuses on establishing joint rules and enhancing security standards for sensitive technologies, specifically AI, cybersecurity, critical supply chains, and next-generation military and dual-use technologies. By coordinating export control policies and improving technology review mechanisms, the three countries are setting global standards and aiming to lock in technological advantage in future warfare. This integration is designed to reduce technological dependency on adversaries, effectively creating a high-tech fence. This deep military integration, characterized by institutionalization, C2 alignment, operational readiness, and industrial coordination, forms the formidable geopolitical wall China is now actively looking to breach.
This military integration is massive, but as we often see in geopolitics, the most imposing military wall can collapse if the economic foundations beneath it are shaky. And this is where we pivot to the economic reality underpinning this alliance, specifically the centrality of the shipbuilding industry and a massive structural U.S. critical capacity gap.
Shipbuilding is, at its core, a strategic industry. It's the engine of any global naval power. It's crucial not just for building warships, but also for logistics transport, commercial shipping, and critically, the ability to maintain, repair, and overhaul a global fleet. The U.S. cannot achieve or maintain maritime dominance, especially facing competition in the Indo-Pacific, without a robust shipbuilding sector, and this is where Washington is critically vulnerable.
How bad is the U.S. vulnerability right now in hard numbers and programs?
The situation is severe. The U.S. industrial base is facing years of program delays and explosive cost overruns. For instance, the high-priority Columbia-class strategic nuclear submarine program is facing delays of 12 to 16 months. That could delay the deployment of the next generation of nuclear deterrents. Even more concerning, the Virginia-class attack submarines are delayed by 24 to 36 months.
2 to 3 years of delay on frontline attack submarines, that's not just a logistical problem. That's a fundamental capacity crisis that directly impacts the readiness of the U.S. Navy.
It absolutely is. And it's compounded by a major labor shortage. Analysts estimate the U.S. needs an additional 140,000 skilled workers, welders, pipe fitters, engineers, just to meet the demands for submarine production over the next decade. Meanwhile, U.S. naval projections for 2030 show a fleet size of about 294 battle force ships. Contrast this with China's PLA Navy, which is projected to reach 395 ships by 2025 and 435 by 2030. The quantity gap sustained by vast industrial capacity is startling.
And that naval disparity is fundamentally underpinned by commercial dominance, which is where the true scale of the industrial imbalance becomes just obvious.
Correct. In 2024, China achieved an astounding 76.2% of new global shipbuilding orders by tonnage. The U.S., by comparison, accounts for less than 1% of the global commercial market. Now, while building a complex nuclear warship is different from a commercial freighter, this enormous industrial base provides the capacity, the material flow, advanced manufacturing techniques, and, crucially, the massive skilled workforce that the U.S. shipbuilding sector simply lacks. This structural weakness is why the U.S. has to rely heavily on Japan and the ROK to make up for this strategic weakness and stabilize its maritime power projection.
So the U.S. is turning to its allies, seeking to leverage their existing industrial capacity, which is substantial. Let's look at what Japan brings specifically to the table.
Well, Japan possesses deep independent shipbuilding capacity and world-class technology, honed over decades. They are leaders in specific niche technologies crucial for future naval warfare, notably in lithium-ion battery submarines, which offers superior endurance and quiet operation compared to traditional diesel-electric boats. Their expertise in advanced materials and modular construction is also vital, especially given the U.S. Navy's goal of having 40% of its fleet be uncrewed by 2050. Japan is an indispensable partner, capable of producing cutting-edge combatant vessels that integrate easily with U.S. forces.
And South Korea, too, has a massive industrial footprint, particularly in commercial scale.
Their scale is immense. The ROK operates some of the world's largest commercial and military shipyards, including Hanwha Ocean and Hyundai Heavy Industries. These companies collectively boast the capacity to produce over 220 vessels annually. They have a proven track record delivering complex warships, including destroyers and submarines, efficiently and at scale for their own navy, making their capacity a major strategic asset that the U.S. is determined to integrate into its industrial system.
This brings us to the actual shipbuilding cooperation network being constructed by the U.S., Japan, and the ROK. What is the fundamental U.S. strategy for leveraging this allied capacity?
The core U.S. strategy is to tap into allied expertise, financial resources, and industrial capacity to revitalize its own maritime dominance without having to immediately solve its own labor and industrial crises. This involves several key options: encouraging massive allied participation in maintenance, repair, and overhaul, or MRO, for U.S. ships, employing modular construction techniques involving allied components, and critically, encouraging allied financial investment in struggling U.S. shipyards. This is a complex mix of friendshoring, industrial consolidation, and capacity offloading.
How is Japan formally aligning with this strategy?
Japan has formally aligned through the Defense Industrial Cooperation, Acquisition, and Sustainment Forum, or DICAS, established in June 2024. The specific immediate goal of DICAS is to dramatically expand MRO services for U.S. ships in Japan, allowing U.S. vessels to remain forward deployed longer. Following the leadership talks in October 2025, they outlined further commitments, including establishing a dedicated Japan-U.S. shipbuilding working group and forming joint ventures specifically designed to invest in and upgrade U.S. shipyards. This is a deliberate strategic attempt to integrate Japan's high-tech manufacturing base directly into the U.S. defense industrial supply chain, boosting U.S. competitiveness against Chinese production volume.
Now, ROK's integration seems even more direct and, frankly, aggressive, particularly when you look at Hanwha Ocean.
ROK's moves are indeed viewed by the U.S. as a game-changing milestone in our new maritime statecraft. Hanwha Ocean made a major strategic acquisition in 2024 of the U.S.-based Philly shipyard, securing a foothold in U.S. domestic production. But most significantly, in July 2024, Hanwha Ocean secured the Master Ship Repair Agreement, or MSRA, with the U.S. Navy. This is official, high-level recognition that the Korean firm is qualified and capable of performing high-level ship maintenance and repair on U.S. vessels. This positions ROK as a critical node in the highly profitable and strategically vital MRO market, solidifying its role as a key pillar in the U.S. naval operations support structure across the Pacific. This comprehensive military and industrial containment strategy provides the high-stakes backdrop against which China is executing its economic counterpunch.
We've spent 2 sections detailing the construction of the U.S.-led wall, a system of military integration and industrial dependency. China's strategy is designed to create an alternative lifeline, a strategic counteroffer based entirely on economic stability and Seoul's national self-interest. And this opportunity only arose because of the intense and sudden political pivot in Seoul.
The shift in South Korea was indeed dramatic and rooted in voter fatigue. The radical hardline stance of former President Yoon Suk-yeol, driven by ideological security perceptions and fed by that social media bubble we discussed, led to a political crisis, culminating in his dismal 11% approval rating and, ultimately, impeachment. This instability cleared the political path for Lee Jae-myung, who campaigned and won on a platform of pragmatic diplomacy centered on national interests.
Lee's stated philosophy perfectly encapsulates the complete rejection of the previous ideological formwork.
His words were a clear mission statement. In the international community, there are no permanent enemies or permanent friends. Only national interest is eternal. This marks a clear strategic departure from the previous administration's near-exclusive alignment with Washington and Tokyo. Lee recognized the urgent need to stabilize key relationships, choosing Japan for his first state visit in August 2025 to stabilize the deeply troubled ROK Japan relationship first. This freed him up to simultaneously signal a firm commitment to dialogue with North Korea and practical diplomacy with China. Beijing immediately seized on this narrow political window.
And China's proposal to Lee Jae-myung is packaged as a comprehensive, stabilizing offer designed to dismantle the U.S. alliance brick by targeting ROK's core economic vulnerabilities. Let's start with Proposal 1. The critical China-Japan-South Korea Free Trade Agreement, the CJK-FTA breakthrough, and the de-escalation of the THAAD missile system dispute.
This is a classic example of China using economic leverage as a diplomatic tool. Beijing is making a strategic concession here. After years of stagnation and using punitive measures like the Korea ban, which targeted cultural exports, tourism, and some commercial goods, as bargaining chips, China is offering a genuine, deep economic commitment. They are moving beyond simple goods trade and offering deep binding in cultural and service trade, crucially offering to open their vast digital economy to South Korea. For the export-dependent Korean economy, currently facing global stagnation, this is positioned as a vital, life-saving shot in the arm.
So the pure economic gravity is being maximized. And what is the quiet diplomatic return China expects for delivering this overwhelming economic lifeline?
The expectation is a silent, mutual understanding regarding the controversial U.S.-supplied THAAD missile defense system deployed in South Korea. The Lee government would allow THAAD to enter a state of technical hibernation, meaning no further upgrades or expansion of the system. This subtly addresses Beijing's long-standing concerns that the radar system far exceeds the Korean Peninsula's defense needs, which is why China retaliated so aggressively against ROK previously, without requiring Seoul to publicly violate its existing defense commitments to Washington. It's a pragmatic, silent de-escalation driven by economic necessity and providing a huge, stabilizing framework. The move helps promote regional economic integration and establishes a robust, high-standard free trade network across East Asia.
And this really hits home for the everyday Korean business person. Let's return to that story we found about a logistics firm owner named Mr. Park. He encapsulates the years of frustration caused by the ideological tensions.
Absolutely. Think about Mr. Park. He spent years navigating unpredictable shifts in tariffs, facing bureaucratic cool-downs, and dealing with arbitrary restrictions, all because diplomatic ties were strained by the previous administration's hardline stance. His business felt like it was committing a moral betrayal just to trade with the mainland, which is South Korea's largest market. Now, under the revitalized China-Japan-South Korea Free Trade Agreement, Mr. Park and others like him are seeing a green channel open up. And why? Because the sheer economic gravity of a high-standard free trade network is simply too heavy to ignore. When pragmatic cooperation, built on solid trade, delivers tangible daily benefits like functioning ports, stable customs, and steady supply chains, that force can indeed override ideological and security conflicts.
Now let's talk about the geopolitical trump card Proposal 4, the Great Yellow Sea Corridor, and the Continental Connection. This directly addresses South Korea's most deep-seated geopolitical vulnerability, something Washington cannot fix with a naval fleet.
This vulnerability is known as island anxiety. Because the Korean peninsula is cut off from the Eurasian continent by the DPRK, its entire logistics network for energy, manufacturing components, and export trade is wholly dependent on vulnerable sea lanes. In a major conflict scenario, say one involving the Taiwan Strait or a blockage near Malacca, the South Korean economy could be instantly suffocated by a naval blockade. They are strategically isolated.
That fear of being an isolated island is a significant strategic and psychological prison, as some Korean analysts have termed it. China is offering a literal physical escape route, shifting ROK's identity.
China's solution is the establishment of a high-density train ferry system between major Chinese ports like Weihai or Dalian and ROK ports like Incheon or Busan. The critical element is that this system would be seamlessly integrated into the sprawling China-Europe Railway Express network. The geopolitical significance of this project is immense. It transforms ROK back into a continental nation, offering a vital logistics lifeline that is not controlled by the U.S. 7th Fleet. For Seoul, this is an offer that breaks ROK free from that psychological prison of total sea dependence and gives them a strategic, autonomous logistics route.
It provides true economic and logistical resilience, which is a true alternative stability mechanism that Washington's military-centric framework simply cannot match.
And that connects directly to Proposal 2. The safety valve promise for the peninsula. Lee Jae-myung pledged that peace is in the hands of Koreans themselves. The U.S. military first approach, or nuclear umbrella, has ironically resulted in constant tension because it relies on deterrence rhetoric, not dialogue. China, in contrast, offers its unique and considerable influence over Pyongyang to establish a new multilateral security coordination mechanism for Northeast Asia, explicitly ensuring ROK is a core participating nation. This is a mechanism for stability and practical dialogue that empowers Lee to manage his own strategic environment, something the U.S. alliance structure, which focuses primarily on joint military deterrence, is fundamentally unable to deliver. We move now to the core technological and industrial levers China is employing to secure this long-term economic and diplomatic flip. This starts with Proposal 3, aimed directly at the heart of South Korea's economic powerhouse, the semiconductor industry. This is the perfect example of ROK's impossible geopolitical tightrope walk. The Korean chip giants, Samsung and SK Hynix, are trapped in a critical dilemma. They are technologically dependent on U.S. equipment, software, and intellectual property, yet they rely immensely on the Chinese market, which accounts for approximately 40% of their total sales and revenue. The U.S. chip wall built through export controls threatens to choke off this massive revenue source.
That is the definition of a two-front war for them, where the political risk from one superpower directly impacts the market opportunity on the other side. What is China proposing to resolve this internal contradiction for the Korean chaebols?
China is proposing the creation of a China-South Korea semiconductor special zone or joint venture model. This is a deliberate mechanism, potentially expanding existing industrial parks or establishing special joint ventures, designed to use legal and supply chain gray areas. It is effectively a way for Korean conglomerates to navigate the U.S. export controls. The intent is to allow them to maintain their huge market share in China while structurally mitigating the risks posed by U.S. long-arm jurisdiction and export controls.
So it's market logic finding a way to overwhelm political dictates. It gives the Korean giants a loophole to continue thriving.
Exactly. As commentators have noted, in the face of this kind of overwhelming market logic, the need for revenue and market access, even the strongest political headwinds must eventually change direction. This strategic proposal, alongside ongoing ministerial talks aimed at enhancing collaboration in the chip industry, strengthens bilateral trade and aims to foster breakthroughs in next-generation technological infrastructure. The collaborative opportunities between China and South Korea enhance global supply chain security by reducing both countries' reliance on external, foreign suppliers for key technological infrastructure, securing stability through mutual technological advancement.
Next, let's look at Proposal 5, targeting the future of energy and transport, a pan-Asian hydrogen and battery swapping agreement. This is a fascinating counter-strategy, particularly because it uses the protectionism of the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, as its starting point.
The U.S. IRA was designed to boost domestic U.S. manufacturing, but inadvertently damaged ROK automakers like Hyundai and Kia because their vehicles, built in Korea, didn't qualify for U.S. consumer subsidies. China recognized that opening. The strategy is to propose a China-South Korea standards alliance specifically focused on battery swapping technology and hydrogen transport infrastructure.
Why is a standards alliance so powerful here, beyond just making parts compatible?
It creates instant, massive market leverage. China has the dominant manufacturing scale for EV batteries, and the capacity to produce cheap hydrogen. And the ROK's Hyundai Group has bet heavily on hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. If they unify standards for battery swapping and hydrogen transport, they instantly create a huge, unified Asian market capable of competing effectively with the dominant proprietary Tesla framework and the closed U.S. ecosystem. For ROK firms facing a brutal two-front war against global EV giants, this standards alliance provides a crucial survival strategy and a path to market dominance in Asia.
The ultimate goal here, it seems, is less about confrontation and more about demonstrating that China is actively leading Northeast Asian states toward positive, multilateral competition and regional coherence, regardless of what Washington is doing.
That is the long-term vision. China's strategy leverages its 4 global initiatives on development, security, civilization, and governance to foster an open, inclusive regional architecture. By prioritizing economic stability, China is deepening economic interembedding with ROK and Japan. A major part of this is actively pressing for the conclusion of the China-Japan-ROK Free Agreement and maximizing the economic potential of the existing RCE framework.
Let's focus on RCEP for a moment. What specific mechanism within RCEP is so crucial to China's strategy?
RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, is critical because it simplifies the complex rules of origin. For South Korean firms operating integrated supply chains across East Asia, RCEP makes it far easier and cheaper to claim regional origin for their products, reducing tariffs and streamlining logistics across all participating nations. Maximizing RCEP means providing unparalleled stability and low-cost access across Asia, making ROK firms much more competitive globally. This deep integration reduces the appeal of the U.S. policy of de-risking supply chains.
This is a textbook move to increase the cost of alignment with the U.S., isn't it?
It is about increasing the opportunity cost. This economic strategy is explicitly designed to raise the financial and industrial cost for both Japan and the ROK if they choose to align exclusively with the U.S. military first framework and pursue restrictive policies. By providing vast market access, supply chain stability, and technological cooperation, China offers a genuine, economically compelling alternative. Finally, to ensure this strategic pivot has domestic support and builds public trust, China plans to release an updated China-Japan-ROK cooperation white paper covering 2013-2025. This document will detail facts and data about successful cooperation across trade, climate governance, and disaster relief, systematically building a concrete, facts-based, positive narrative for pragmatic cooperation in the region, countering negative media narratives. This evolution of pragmatic diplomatic frameworks in Northeast Asia is intended to lay the foundation for long-term regional stability and the collective pursuit of sustainable development goals through mutual economic interests.
So we have seen 2 comprehensive realities emerge from this deep dive. On one side, the institutionalized war incubation mechanism of the US-Japan-ROK quasi-alliance, built on joint command structures, deep intelligence sharing, and economic counter-alliance in the shipbuilding sector.
And on the other, China's highly strategic deployment of economic and diplomatic lifelines. These counteroffers focused on continental rail links, FTA acceleration, high-tech cooperation zones, and a new energy standards alliance directly target the critical, fragile link in the chain. Seoul's immediate need for pragmatic survival strategies independent of Washington's military-first framework.
The lesson here is clear. While audiences in the West may be distracted by the algorithmic illusion of a surrounded China, the popular China isolation theory, the real strategic action is happening quietly, focusing on economics and infrastructure. Li Jiming's political track switch is not just rhetoric, it's tangibly connecting South Korea to a whole new set of tracks, both tangible and intangible, laid by China and leading deep into the Eurasian continent.
China is demonstrating that stability in Northeast Asia requires adhering to the vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security. It's prioritizing economic engagement to strengthen security, trust, and pragmatic cooperation, and making clear that the path of peaceful development is possible, even amid strategic competition.
The true measure of regional stability in Northeast Asia may ultimately be found not in the rhetoric of great power military deterrence, but in the overwhelming, quiet, gravitational force of market opportunity that compels nations to prioritize the physical tracks of trade over the abstract lines of alliance.